Ever since Phrolova released, I've been thinking, are triple element teams the future of Wuthering Waves' meta? Let's talk about it. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Slowly but surely, there's something that I've noticed. WuWa has been introducing more and more triple element teams. This is previously something that wasn't that prevalent in the meta, but the further we've delved into 2.x, the more triple element teams we've had available to us. And I personally think that they've been becoming a lot more prominent in recent times, and I actually do welcome them. I don't think they're a bad thing at all. The most recent example of this would obviously be Triple Havoc. This patch, we got Phrolova, and her release retroactively buffed up the value of both Cantarella and Roshia, making two units that were previously not that strong in the meta feel actually relevant again. Roshia was just extremely hard to justify before in general because she only had one use case in which she wasn't really all that good, and Cantarella, while she does have some degree of flexibility to her, was still simply outclassed by every other unit that was able to play in her roles. With Phrolova's release, we ended up getting a very smooth Triple Havoc team that retroactively ended up pulling up the meta value of both Roshia and Cantarella. So clearly this triple team in particular ended up having quite a positive meta impact. New life had been given to these previously unremarkable characters when it came to the meta. And while those two do still end up remaining as somewhat niche pulls because you would only really pull them for Phrolova in particular, Phrolova's a very strong DPS, so I can definitely see somebody pulling those two if they want to play her absolute best in slot team. It just ends up working very nicely because each character is able to intro into each other and their outros all benefit each other very nicely, creating a very smooth gameplay loop. And then we go back to Triple Fusion, which came before Triple Havoc. This is very interesting to me because each member of Triple Fusion is actually able to work on their own on an account. Changli is able to work with basically any character that's able to reasonably quick swap. Brent Wuthering Waves is a really good second slot teammate in multiple different comps. And Lupa, being the most restrictive of the three, still has other options, namely with Encore in particular. But the point stands, each and every one of them has some other option on an account, and they don't have to be played with one another, or you can even play them in duos. You can play Brant with Changli, and then play Changli as a main DPS, or you can play Lupa with Brant and play Brant as a main DPS. But if you put them all together, you get a very seamless rotation in which you swap from one to the other, and it's a lot easier to play than standard quick swap. And once again, all of their outros end up benefiting each other, and it was really interesting to see the culmination of the Triple Fusion team happen over time, because unlike Triple Havoc, which I feel happened quite quickly, this happened over a longer period of time. Changli is very interesting because she's one of these characters that's really good to invest into if you have a really high skill level, but if you don't, then I would only really recommend getting her if you're getting her as a part of the Triple Fusion team. When Brent Wuthering Waves eventually released as a second slot teammate for her, I never expected Changli to get any more team options, and while Lupa is technically more of a Brant team option, so to speak, because her outro skill tailors to him perfectly, she still ended up completing her overall team core, making a new really seamless way to play the team, while also being able to free up Shorekeeper, which is something that I'll touch on in a moment. Now with that being said, those two aren't the only triple element teams in the game. I would say that those are the comps that are balanced around being triple element teams, in the sense that they are made in a way where their outros all benefit each other and it's all very seamless and quite easy to pilot. However, there are also some other instances of us having triple element teams that are very strong. For example, Cardathea teams. You're able to play the Divine Maiden, Shakona, and then Arrow Rover, and that's a very strong team. You can also replace Cardathea with Gion, and that team is still going to be very effective. Or even in Zani's case, if you're playing Zani with Phoebe, your third slot teammate doesn't have to be Shorekeeper or some kind of third slot healer. You're even able to use Spectral Rover there, because he's still able to provide Spectral Res Shred with his S6. So with that in mind, we've been getting more and more triple element teams, with the buffs to Cantarella and Roshia being the most recent development in this aspect, and I would say that it's doing one mainly interesting thing. It's giving a lot of alternatives to Shorekeeper. Now, do I think that this makes Shorekeeper suddenly a worse pull? I would say what it does is that it does negate the absolute need for her, but she's still an absolutely excellent character to have on your account, mostly because, like I said earlier, some of these pulls can still end up being quite niche. Getting Changli and Brant can very much be something that you do without having any intention of putting them in a triple team, but someone like Lupa, you're going to be getting Lupa because you're investing into fusion characters specifically. And you're basically just not pulling for Roshia unless you have Phrolova and Cantarella, because if you don't have Cantarella but you do have Phrolova, then it's still quite hard to justify getting her, because the main thing that Roshia does that's so good in that team is that her outro skill is able to buff up Cantarella's damage, and it ends up being a very nice symbiotic relationship between every character in the team. So I don't suddenly think that these triple element teams have made Shorekeeper useless or anything like that. far from it, she's still very good, and in fact, Shorekeeper's existence can negate the requirement for you to go out and pull these more niche characters, which I personally think is a very good thing. But what it is doing is providing other options, and I actually was never expecting this. I didn't think that Wuthering Waves was going to go in this direction, but I do think that we're probably going to get more of these. And if I'm being honest, I don't mind that at all. I think it's a very interesting combat style, and it plays really well into intro and outro skills. If you ask me, my personal favorite of a lot is the Triple Fusion team, simply because investing into it is just so safe. You're able to use those characters of so many of our different teams, it's just very, very nice. However, I do think that this team structure in general is quite nice. You see, I wasn't really a huge fan of negative statuses after a certain point, because I felt like all they really did was just restrict characters. They didn't really do much for teams that was that interesting in my opinion, because I don't really feel like Kuro Games has explored actual DOT yet. We haven't really gotten a DPS that detonates negative statuses. So far, it's more so been a case of apply the negative status, and that's going to make your on-field character do more damage. But this development with triple teams is interesting, because as we've seen, it was able to breathe new life into Roshia and Cantarella. Now, I don't want to overglaze them too much, because I don't suddenly think that Roshia and Cantarella are these insane S-tier pulls. They are still very much within the confines of being niche units that you only really get for one select purpose. And Roshia was already like that before. You got her if you wanted to high invest in Camellia, but even then you just really had no reason to do that. But now, at least there is a justifiable reason to do that. And in Cantarella's case, she now has a really meaningful place to exist in the meta. Whereas previously, she was just kind of drifting between teams, and in Triple Fusion's case, it provided a very easy way to play characters like Chang-Li. I would say that every triple team that I've personally seen has only actually had a positive impact on the meta. More often than not, it includes giving characters new use cases, it includes making certain characters like Chang-Li easier to play, and it also includes freeing up your Shorekeeper. So I actually don't even think that this is a bad direction whatsoever. I feel like we could one day see a triple team for every single element. I don't think that they're going to make a ton of triple teams for each respective element. What I do expect them to do is just have one dedicated triple team for each element, and they're going to play very seamlessly. These teams feel super strong and intuitive, and I personally really enjoy playing them myself. Now, I don't expect them to front load all of it. For example, Triple Fusion took a very long time to complete. Chang-Li is a unit that released in 1.1, and we didn't get Brant until 2.1, and then Lupa only came out later on in 2.4. Now, I will once again mention that Triple Havoc did have a much shorter timeline when it came to releases. Now, it is possible that they could speed up the process for the future, but I'm not sure. I'm also unsure if Kuro considers things like Triple Arrow to already be finished considering Cardathea teams. My guess is no, because while those are triple teams, quote-unquote, they don't exactly have the specific playstyle that I'm talking about. And another reason why I find these teams interesting is because they do have genuine impact on each other. They all thrive best when they are together. Roshia is just not worth getting for Phrolova if you don't have Cantarella, and Cantarella's performance in Phrolova teams is gimped if you don't have Roshia. I will say you would prefer to have Cantarella than Roshia because you can just use Shorekeeper's your first slot and that's still going to feel very, very good, but either way, they perform best when paired with one another. I would say there's only one major drawback to these triple teams. They are quite expensive in terms of Astrites. They feature 5 limited 5-star characters, and let's be real, Kuro hasn't really shown interest in making new 4-star characters that are on the same quality level as Mortefi and Sanhua. Or even just making 4 stars at all for that matter. I mean, consider that Lumi released all the way back in 1.4 and we haven't seen a single new 4-star release since then. There might have been someone else, but I do believe it was Lumi, Yohu, and then we just haven't gotten a new 4-star. So they're definitely expensive. But what I will say is that at least with the triple teams that we currently have, in Triple Fusion's case, you very much can collect the components of that team over time, and they will still find a use on your account. It's a bit rougher in Triple Havoc's case, but consider that Phrolova is a character that has plenty of viable teams, and you don't really need her best in slot in order to feel like you're making the most out of her. And while it is kind of unfortunate that both of her best in slot teammates don't really feel like they're doing that much without each other, thus meaning that yes, her best in slot team is more on the expensive side, Roshia can still ultimately be replaced with somebody like Verena or Shorekeeper, and you can easily put Donjin in place of Cantarella and not actually lose out on that much, because without Roshia buffing up Cantarella's damage, Donjin can honestly get the job done just fine. So these triple teams aren't perfect. I acknowledge that they're definitely expensive, especially if you consider that most characters nowadays really want their signature weapon, so you're gonna be getting S0, R1 full premium 5-star teams. But at least gameplay-wise, I like them. The one that we got in 2.5 had a very positive effect on the meta overall, making 2 characters that weren't that good feel actually pretty decent. And the gameplay loop of these teams just feels very smooth. They are definitely more on the premium side, but I would hope that Kuro Games does continue to make them, because here's the thing, they're on the premium side, but so far, there's not really been a case of a triple team that you need. I honestly think that negative statuses are more costly as a team archetype, because if you don't have a negative statuses dedicated enabler, then the main DPS for that negative status just won't feel that good. But if you don't have Phrolova's best installed premium triple Havoc team, well, she's still gonna feel great with other teammates, and that's the same case of Changli and Brand. You can put them with basically anyone else, and they're gonna be good. Good direction overall. I personally like what they're doing here. But what about yourself? Do you feel like they're a little bit too expensive, or is there something else that you don't like about them? Or are you also a fan of these triple teams? Let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hopefully this video was able to feed you some food for thought in regards to whatever triple element teams in the future of WuWa's meta. This has been Juice, signing out, and we'll see where WuWa's triple trouble goes from here.